using non-production virtual machines in production clusters. For the majority of the customers I work with, that could be a major disaster if they misinterpret this in discussions with auditors in case of an audit or any review. Are you allowed to use them or not? And I'm seeing articles popping up on various websites and videos on YouTube advising on how to license virtual machines in non-production environments. And what they all say is you should not run non-production VMs on production hosts. Can you do that or not? First time I had to deal with this subject was quite long ago. It was back in 2010, maybe, then 2013. I created training courses. One of the trainings that I did at the time was for Microsoft. So Microsoft paid me to create the training on licensing Visual Studio and development tools. And that was one of the topics we discussed with the people in the Visual Studio product group. They told me that internally in Microsoft, there was a big misunderstanding, misconception between the licensing advisory group and the development tools group. The advice that customers were getting was always different. So one customer would get the response saying, yes, you may run non-production VMs on production host as long as the VM itself is non-production. Other customers would get a very harsh response. Everything that is on a production host must be licensed as production, regardless of what's the purpose of the virtual machine. And that story went on and on and on and on. Around October 2014, Microsoft finally clarified the definition of a production environment, after which the community just said, thank you. Without giving you a yes or no answer, I'll give you a few hints. I'll give you a few ideas so you can interpret it yourself. And then in the end, I'll tell you my interpretation. What is a production environment? What's the definition of a production environment? Production environment means any physical or virtual operating system environment, OSE. It's an operating system environment. It's what's inside an operating system, isolated, running a production workload or accessing production data. Or physical OSE, pay attention to that, physical OSE, hosting one or more virtual OSEs, running production workloads or accessing production data. The key thing here is the operating system environment. This is a hardware host. It's running Windows Server Data Center as a hypervisor with Hyper-V. It could be VMware as well. It could be any hypervisor. Why I brought Windows Server Data Center here? Because that is what Microsoft is calling physical OSE. Physical operating system environment. In that physical OSE, you run virtual machines. Let me use colors. Non-production is green. This one is also green, also non-prod. So these are your development machines. This is going to be a production virtual machine. So then the question is, do you need to license all the software on this host as production because you have production workloads there? Do you have to license the host as production, the entire host? Let's go back to the definition. I'm not giving you an answer yet. Production environment means any physical or virtual operating system environment. Again, operating system environment, that bubble, operating system. Running a production workload or accessing production data, or, pay very close attention, physical operating system environment hosting one or more virtual OSEs, virtual operating system environments. Even if there's one virtual operating system environment that is production, you need to also license the physical operating system environment as production. Let's look at the picture again. So we have this physical OSE, and because it's running one production VM, this physical OSE, and I remind you, I'm using Red to flag production, it's also production. Nowhere in that definition, it says you must license the entire host as production. It says physical operating system environment, that physical bubble. And operating system environment, it's a separate operating system with its own admin rights, with its own settings, with its own... And in that case, by those definitions, firstly, it's not said that you need to license the host. It says physical OSE, not the host, not the entire host. It never says that. Production status doesn't extend back from the physical OSE to the virtual OSE. It never says that. We must be careful always. I say, if something is not explicitly granted, it's not granted. I agree, that is a gray area, because Microsoft didn't explicitly say, but that doesn't extend back from physical to virtual. At least in all the audits and all the negotiations with people when we involved the licensing group since 2014, the response is always, yes, it's absolutely fine to mix non-production and production VMs on a host. And you don't need to license those non-production VMs as production, because that virtual machine, that production virtual machine, this one, it makes the hosting, the physical operating system production. But that status doesn't affect these non-production VMs. I promise you to give you my view. That's my view. That is what I advise. And I appreciate some people saying, Alex, that's your interpretation. I know it works. That interpretation is based on what's written there. I mean, how can you interpret it differently? I mean, if you do interpret it differently, please let me know how, but not just, but I interpret it differently. Give me your logical chain of thought. Otherwise, you're advising your customers to pay more to Microsoft, money they shouldn't pay. And we're all about savings right now. So let's save. My main core advice is always isolate. Try and avoid this topic of discussion entirely. Isolate as much as you can. Isolate external use, isolate internal use, isolate non-production, isolate. Create a separate cluster and just forget about these questions entirely. But if you run into this question, how can you misinterpret that definition? I'm not sure. So let me know. Let me know how you read that. Because it talks about operating system environments. And so it doesn't say if a physical OSE is production, the hosted virtual OSEs must be also licensed as production. No, it doesn't. There's no backward effect. If you like what you've just seen, please send me a connection request on LinkedIn. The link is in the description. And please subscribe to this channel so you do not miss any of the future updates and any of the future live shows that I upload here, at least weekly. Thank you, and safe with knowledge of Microsoft licensing.